When the Buddha was asked by other recluses from different sects, and his bhikkhus were also asked this question quite a number of times as to why do we live the spiritual life? Why do we have the holy life to live? And the Buddha gave us the answer that it is to gain understanding, to gain understanding. This was unheard of at the time of the Buddha and his contemporaries. At that time period in human history. Now, as to understanding itself, we see how he always contrasted it, the understanding itself, to our role, the role that we play in perpetuating an ignorant existence. It's an ignorant existence because it is driven by clinging. That is, clinging to the 5 aggregates. Clinging to the 5 aggregates. The 5 aggregates basically are the things, the component parts of an individual, the things that make up an individual according to the Buddha's teaching. There in Pali, they're called the Panca Khandha. Pancha means 5, Khandha means the aggregates. Now, without understanding the 5 aggregates, the Buddha tells us that we simply cannot overcome suffering. It's impossible to attain Nibbana without understanding the aggregates. I mean, that's how crucial they are on our path. Now, the path is all about getting a better understanding of life, of existence. I like to see it as a correct perspective, a completely radical way of understanding our living experience and of existence itself. Now, for this, the Buddha explained that an individual, again, needs to have these 5 parts, the aggregates, right? Which can be taken apart. We can look at them, we can take them apart, we can dissect them mentally. And then look carefully at their relationship one with the other. Especially to understand the ways that we take them for granted. Hence, the word that I used earlier about ignorance, living with ignorance. Because this is, again, perpetuated by this sense of clinging, various levels of it on our part. Now, what are the 5 aggregates? Just to, in case you don't know, they're basically 5, as mentioned. So mentality, materiality, that's a combination, but it still is one, seen as one. A few weeks ago, I think, might have been last week or the previous week, when I made the topic on Namarupa. That's what it is, mentality, materiality. The second aggregate is the feeling part. Feeling is different than emotion in the Dhamma. In the most simplistic way of looking at feeling, according to the Buddha's Dhamma, we look at them in, we look at feeling, that is, in its 3 facets. Feeling pleasant things, experiences, feeling unpleasant or painful things or experiences, and ignorance or deluded states of being, meaning neither pleasant nor painful. let's say right now, the lateral part of your shoulders, as your clothing is touching it, you're neither experiencing it as painful nor pleasurable. So it's just, it's just there. You're not that involved. A very, very simple way of looking at something. Conversely, when you're talking about the jhanas, for example, there are certain states where you go to neither painful nor pleasurable experiences as well. They're still falling within the category of feeling, the category as in the aggregate of feeling, versus emotions. Emotions can be very diverse: jealousy, hatred, anger, fear, all these, joy, jubilance, all these things are different emotions. But the simple formula for feeling, the Buddha broke it down to three. He had much more complex categorizations of feeling, but that's a totally different subject to tackle. But essentially, there are three, anyhow: the feeling aggregate. Next comes the perception aggregate, which I also like to term it as memories, the associations of memories that the mind gets involved in and with. The fourth one are the generative causes, or sankharas. I like to call them generative causes because they have this impetus, this fueling agency that they have, is to compel, to propel a certain directional action, if you will. Mental conjurings could be another term for it. Bhikkhu Bodhi calls it formations, for example. Other scholars, monks, have called it preparations, for example. And then finally, the fifth aggregate is vijnana, or consciousness, which for many of us, like, what does that mean? The mind has a difficulty to wrap itself around that concept. What is a consciousness? So the simplest version I found was, I believe when I used to read, I still do, read Ajahn Mahabua's work, and he calls it sense awareness, which resonated with me rather quickly. So now coming back to the clinging part. Clinging, it's like the glue that puts all these five together. It's like it ties them all up. And then we can call them, this is me. This is you. This clinging can only be unraveled or let go of in the presence of understanding and wisdom, which is basically what the Buddha was talking about, his path, the Dhamma. But we often forget that wisdom itself does not merely come from reading suttas, or comes, doesn't even come on its own just like that. It's not a waiting game. It definitely is not the result of pondering or analysis, thinking. We need to work in the laboratory of life itself to understand, to gain the wisdom, to unravel, to take apart the glue that holds these aggregates together. In other words, we must train vigorously. Train the mind, that is. We often forget that the mind is like a muscle. And if we want to make a muscle or the body do a certain thing, a certain task, we need to train that muscle. I mean, we believe, we understand that as a concrete fact about life when we're discussing other disciplines, other aspects of our lives. However, when it comes to the mind, for some reason, we think that just sitting and meditating or reading a few suttas or arguing, on some platform on what we think the Buddha meant is going to do it for us. Nibbana is just going to fall into our laps. That's not going to happen. In order to break the bonds of ignorance and the hold that the various contaminants or the asavas, the taints, have on us, we need to be courageous enough to look at the characteristics of nature. The three hallmarks, the three signatas that the Buddha talked about on his night of enlightenment, awakening. And those are anicca, impermanence, the change that always is occurring, dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, suffering, and anatta, the non-substantiality, the independent entity that we think exists irrespective of everything else, substantially there on its own, the self. But we got to look at them we have to look at them in an up close and personal manner in our everyday life, in our dealings with different situations, with different people, in our interactions, and how these interactions come to register within the body. Oftentimes we forget that the Buddha also quite a bit actually emphasized the importance of looking into the body and how the body is being affected. Somehow, I mean, when you leave it to commentators, this is bound to happen. They just go into heady endeavors and they remove the teaching from the body, the physical body of the individual, and they just dwell in concepts, thoughts, arguments, philosophies. When you read the Satipatthana, the Buddha starts from the body, kaya anupassana, very first. In fact, it's all throughout the Satipatthana. So, okay, the five aggregates must be understood, but why? Well, because they bring us, or are soon to bring to us, suffering. Suffering because of anicca, which is impermanence. Impermanence and suffering go hand in hand. So when you look at the five aggregates, you're looking at suffering itself. So long as there's clinging. But as long as we're alive, the Buddha explains this, his disciples explain it. The five aggregates will be our burden. But they also provide for us the very groundwork for wisdom to take place, the foundation for wisdom to take place. In other words, the five aggregates themselves are also the doors through which liberation, nibbana, is experienced. But we have to understand it through and through, the connections between the five aggregates and how the clinging is playing a role. How is clinging really being used as a glue to hold these things together? For me to be blind enough to consider this as a me, this is myself, this is who I am. Why do we call it ignorance? The Buddha calls this also shackles, the bonding that we need to untie ourselves from. And for that, we use different techniques. One of them I already mentioned, the Satipatthana, for example, which is a wonderful tool. A tool of observation, so that is a big one. Becoming more and more aware and mindful of the body within its four postures. Okay, what are the four postures? These are very simple breakdowns of the body in different positions during a normal 24-hour period, meaning sitting, standing, walking, and lying down. These were the very basic postures that the Buddha saw um, as what a human body goes through. Now, can we maintain the mindfulness during these different phases when the body is either in a stationary or dynamic state, while we are continuously purifying the obstructive states of the mind? See, this is in reference to what I was mentioning earlier, that Nibbana doesn't just happen like that without work from our part. The purifying of the mind from its obstructive states during the four states, the four postures that the body is in. Okay, so when you hear me say that, one could think, wait a minute, this is a 24-hour job that you're suggesting here. Yeah. This isn't easy. Nibbana isn't that easy. One has to say it like, it is. And that's one of the reasons why the Buddha always pushed his students to really dedicate a big chunk of their time to practicing in order for them to break loose from suffering. There's no ifs and buts about it. Now, of course, some have had worked so hard, and they still do. Some people I see, and I've come across some who have experienced Nibbana without that much toiling and really struggling. Now, the struggle element is what I want you to just look at briefly and not see it as torture. Earlier, I was mentioning how we need to befriend the mind and not to fight with it, to create an extra tension. We don't need to do that. However, we need to be engaged in an effort in whatever state we are in, whether sitting, walking, standing, or lying down. Bringing our awareness to the mind and to see whether there are any obstructive states. Now, what are they? I've mentioned them many, many times. The easiest category we can think of are the three defilements. I like it, I don't like it, I hate it, and I don't want to have anything to do with this. I just leave me out of this. Ignorant, deluded state. Indifference, if you will. So this effort to look at the mind, to look at our behavior, requires us to have virya, which is energy or perseverance. It requires us to have the desire, the thirst to be curious enough to always look at the mind and just say, what is this doing to me right now? Is there tension in my body right now because of what I have been thinking about? So what I'm encouraging here is to develop that consistency in the meditative process. And that curiosity itself will bring us more and more droplets of wisdom. Because now we are being reintroduced to our own mind and the way we interpret life around us, ourselves, the body, etc. Otherwise, we're just going through this vicious cycle of ignorance, which is bringing us more and more suffering. Dukkha continues to be played out in our lives. Yes, we can blame the outside world, yes, sure. But ultimately, It's about how I am understanding my own, this mentality, materiality process, this bag of memories, associations, and most importantly, how I am interpreting the data that is coming in through the sixth sense doors, which, by the way, are always keeping me amused. The mind is constantly amused by new toys, just like a child. One toy after the other. The moment the child gets to be bored playing with one single toy, boom, the other senses come and give you another toy, something else to be occupied with. A subject that's so intriguing, a memory, a thought, a concept to defend, to shun, a state of affairs to kind of want to transform into what we think should be the case. Meanwhile, it is simply boiling up the water inside. The mind is getting agitated. And so long as the mind is agitated, the holy life is not being lived. There's no peace in the mind, because things are being taken personally. Identification has grabbed hold of us. So I want to give you some tools as to how to identify whether there is a defilement in the mind at that moment in time, the moment that you are mindful. So here's a very quick way of looking at the mind, whether it is sullied, not pure. Question: am I being pulled in? Am I being dragged into this form, this object, this color, this image, this sound, this flavor, this touch, this tactile object I'm touching, or the smell, the fragrance, the memory, the thought, the concept? Am I being pulled into it, sucked into it, liking it, attracted? Am I being pulled into its details, features? And then all of a sudden we're off and running. The mind is going all over the place, seeing images, possibilities. That's one question, which basically is talking about the first defilement. I like it. The second question is to ask, okay, am I then, if the first one was not the case, am I then being repelled, aversive towards, disgusted, utterly annoyed by this sight, by this image, by this sound, or by this, repulsed by this smell, or disgusted by this thought, or this touch? Does it feel like sandpaper? Ooh, is it like glass? Ooh, what is that? The moment you detect that there is this shunning attitude pushing it away from you, you're dealing with the second defilement. And then third question, it could be something like, okay, am I then, if those two were not the case, am I then indifferent towards this object? No, I don't care. Laissez-faire attitude towards this. Or do I want to be oblivious, completely ignorant towards this sound, this object? I don't want to hear it. Or this smell, the thought? No, I don't want to dig into it. Many students have this attitude when it comes to coming across a very juicy aspect of the Dhamma, a sutta, something, and they know that it clicks something in them. It has something to do with them, where they are in their process, but they drop the ball and they go and watch TV, watch Netflix. But that was a juicy moment. There was like a moment of singularity there, perfect for us to kind of probe and just look at things a little bit differently. Now, If any of these things and positions are detected, yep, we're dealing with clinging. What I'm trying to do is basically to kind of bring the 5 aggregates into a more tangible, a more palatable way of um, processing and understanding, because oftentimes they've been very conceptual, at least when I was starting on this path. Okay, what are they? The image that I was given were like pieces of stick, 5 different sticks that are now glued together. Okay, how is that related to me and my living experience? So I'm trying to give you a more direct way of relating with them, given your own experiences in life, and how we can get bound up and shackled by the sense of clinging. So life challenges our beliefs, our truths, our concepts, our understandings. And in the face of all of them, we find ourselves, well, our standards being challenged, our own standards being challenged, which creates that agitation I was mentioning earlier. Now, agitation occurs because of clinging, as I also mentioned. Clinging. Clinging to what? Our idea as to how the world is supposed to be, how the chair is supposed to be when I'm sitting to meditate. I need to just zone out. I need to go deep without any kind of pain in my glutes, in my legs, in my neck. I need to just not be disturbed. Why do hindrances show up? And all of a sudden you're in the midst of a fight, a battle. So we have these longings, these wants, this constant effort of seeking things to be different. And the Buddha encourages us in one of the suttas in the Anguttara Nikaya, in the Patilina Sutta. The Buddha talks about how the moment we let go of these longings of, or he calls them personal truths, if you will, personal concepts. The moment we let go of them, we find ourselves clinging to them, at least, the body suddenly becomes tranquil. Remember what I was mentioning about the body being important? The Buddha says this. There's a tranquilization of the body. There's a relaxation of the body, which removes all tensions. When the tensions are removed, the mind is relaxed. And joy arises in the mind, in the body. There's sukha, not dukkha, there's sukha. Because there isn't that agitation which normally exists in the mind of the normal human being, or the Buddha called them putujjana. The person who is completely enmeshed, completely glued to the idea of the 5 aggregates being me, myself. Unlike the noble disciple or someone who's already awakened, liberated, the Buddha himself, for example, where they still are occupying the body as long as they're alive, but they treat the 5 aggregates as simply a burden. But at the same time, it is this collection of 5 that is sustaining them throughout the remainder of their lives as they teach the Dhamma, as they live the Dhamma, as they are the Dhamma. So letting go of these likes and dislikes is a key to unlocking this chain that holds strongly this clinging sense of the 5 aggregates. And the Buddha's encouragement is very simple. He's encouraging us, simple but not easy, encouraging us to let go of the clinging part and having this mindset of taking up only to give up. You're picking it up and only to give it up. It's like when there's a flood, and I've seen this oftentimes in news films and clips, where people stand in a long chain and they pass on these bags of sand to each other. It's like you pick up and you give back, you give to someone else. You're not holding, but that's what we normally do. The putujana, the ordinary human being, is simply holding. They pick up the sense, this visual object, this thing that happened to them, and they hold it, whether they are loving it, hating it, or they're just, there's this identification with it. And the term that the Buddha used is adana patinisagga, picking up or taking up only to give up, minus the upadana, which is the Pali word for clinging or grasping. Grasping. So even if you hate something, you're technically grasping onto it, saying, I don't want you here. Get out of my life. I need a different version of reality. Thank you very much. But in order for the person never to fall back from that state, the Buddha says they need to constantly be with the mind in the four postures, whether they're sitting, standing, walking, or laying down. Always checking to see, always checking to purify the mind from any obstructive states, images, memories that come invading your peace. Say no. It's your mind applying the four right efforts, preventing, eliminating, introducing, cultivating basically, and maintaining. Eliminating and preventing the unwholesome image, thing, thought, attitude. Cultivating and maintaining the positive one, the wholesome one. The easiest way to do that is to smile. Very simple. Even when you're down, when there's no reason for you to smile, your brain is attacking you and saying, why do I have to smile? Well, try it. Initially, when I started to change my mood, it would take me about 6.5 seconds to change my mood with a simple smile. Now it's less than a second. Simply because the mind got used to it. Because what am I doing? The moment I am smiling, I am actually changing with the musculature on my face. It's actually affecting the neurochemistry in my brain to feel good, because they're connected directly. Even though the visual cortex is not picking up any data that says, hey, it's time for us to really feel great, awesome. Just the muscles are. By smiling, the lifting of the corners of the lips, boom, chain reaction is happening. So basically, I eliminated and prevented a bad state to continue, to perpetuate. And I also introduced something positive, something wholesome. Because 6-7 minutes later, seconds later, I'm feeling amazing, and people around me are going to feel different. So applying that, and by the way, there is less tension in the body, and the mind gets relaxed, not agitated. Nibbana cannot happen in a mind that is agitated. So if you can just take that from today's talk, I appreciate it. Thank you very much for listening, and please, I'd like to hear your thoughts, questions, comments, critiques. Oh, Russell, sorry, I couldn't, I think you were.
Okay.
Yes, now we can hear you. Go ahead.
Me?
I thought you had something to say.
Yeah, I did have a question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
But I'll ask the question anyway. You know, in my I'm sort of a writer and do images and things, and a lot of times part of the creative process is a certain amount of obsession with material things, with identity, with defilements, with perceptions, whether they are, you know, on the pure path or not. And, you know, I basically get involved in the mire and the MIRE.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the is interpreted, what you talk about is striving toward a certain type of or a lack of obsession and this, you know, this type of thing. So something bit of a little bit of because you know I tell my students even when they're writing to use the five senses more. Don't just give me some abstract summary of your feelings. You have to actually get into it. And that's what I try to do. So sometimes maybe it's a different level, what I'm talking about. Maybe it's really not a conflict. I mean, I'm here. So obviously, you know, I'm trying to rebalance things. But really in the process of things, I do try to get into the audience, you know, and I just had a question about people. One, I think a lot of people who are, you know, in my line of work, you know, they do, it gets messy.
Yeah. If, you
So
were,
how do you, you know?
yes.
Thank you.
Your voice was kind of breaking up, but I believe I caught the gist of what you're asking, and I'm just gonna give you my rendition of what I heard you ask. Basically, being a writer and a professor, teacher of writing, you encourage students and yourself to really delve into the five senses, to sense more, go deeper, perhaps in many more dimensions of different layers of what the six senses offer in the given the creative process, which somewhat sounds like it's contrary to what the Buddha is saying or what I'm trying to convey here. How does one negotiate the two or balance, given the fact that you're here in this, 2 hour, 3 hour period? Would that be a fair way of?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Um, I completely understand, and I'm going to try to relate to a similar experience I used to have years ago when I was in acting and doing plays as an actor. And I would really have to struggle to kind of, because just like you described as a writer, as an actor, you're doing the same thing. You're actually becoming the role, the part, really feeling everything that's being felt and then showing it out, just allowing everything to happen. So meanwhile, at the same time, I'm processing the three defilements. So in my case, given my, I wasn't doing it to make money. I just wanted to understand this dynamic thing called a human being. So I had to walk away from that because it was creating more agitation in the mind. Now, I'm not recommending you give up your job. What I'm suggesting is coming back to that word that you used. I believe you said rebalancing. Absolutely. Now, I've seen some actors, again, using that example, I've seen some actors who really go too much, lean too much into the role, be sucked in, and they cannot come out for quite some time. It affects them tremendously, and relationships break apart, etc. They become a totally different person because they've embodied. And you're nodding because you're seeing what I'm. That's what I'm trying to see, if you could encourage within yourself and in your students to see this as simply another mechanism, another tool that the mind is capable of doing, dipping in and coming out. Can you be involved in the creative process using that formula of taking up only to give up? Taking up, picking up only to give up. Can you do that? Which would definitely set you apart from every other writer, because it will allow, I think, the mind to really delve deep into multidimensionally into the creative arena and come up with something wonderful without the identification. I've done this as an artist, as a painter, so I know it's as a writer it shouldn't be any different. But that's what I would like to share with you. I don't know. Does that?
Yeah, I think it helps. I think your metaphor of passing the sandbag along is good because you can't really get toward the goal unless you actually kind of pass it. So I always think of one's creative work as something which once it's sort of done or published or whatever, then basically it's not yours anymore. You don't possess it.
What happened? We lost him. I hope he comes back. Yes.
Thank you very much. I think that's a question that many of us have, because when we're younger, or even as parents, we always encourage our kids to have a passion, because without passion, it's really hard to be good at anything or really enjoy anything. But first of all, I just think of two examples to support your point about it's dangerous to be an actor and then to be totally in the role. So it is well known that in China, there's a very famous classic called Dream of the Red Chamber. And in it, there's a female character who is always depressed and who ended up committing suicide. And three actresses who play that role. Is a very long classic, right? So if you do a TV series, you play the role for 2-3 years. And these three actresses all committed suicide. So there is a way in which people, that they are extremely good. They really play the role very well, but the danger of never being to let go. So there are actually actual examples to show the danger of being totally being sucked into the character. And the other thing I think is also very relevant to a writer, because actually I have told Russell that, I like many writers, but there are very few writers who are not egotistical, probably including himself. And I thought if one can just learn to be involved and to let go. So I really like the idea of picking up only to let go as a thing. It's a very good thing. But my question to you is that then how do you encourage a young person to develop a passion if they are not Buddhists, to say that it is also to, I was trying to, my son loves music and he's finally taking a year doing music and loving study for the first time, and I'm very happy about it. But so how do I kind of inculcate this idea that it's great that you have this passion, but also do not get obsessed with it, other than saying that it's incompatible with nirvana? If it's not a Buddhist, what would be your layman way of telling people that it's also not good to be totally get obsessed with this passion?
Yes, wonderful. Thank you for those examples as well. Yeah, the images that I got as you're asking your question involve, well, first of all, let me just say this. There's a difference between happiness and pleasure. There's a clear difference. In our culture, we've come to see them as one, and that is at our fault, because that also indicates the ignorance that we have. So we associate happiness with the six senses, especially if there's less of the second defilement and more of the first, meaning I like it, I want to get more of this thing that I'm enjoying, which would mean that I'm going to have more happiness at the end. Absolute nonsense as far as the Dhamma is concerned. Now, that doesn't mean that the Dhamma or the Buddha's teachings are against pleasurable experiences. No, they're not. Of course, you would look for a bed that's a little bit more comfortable than a bed of nails, for example. So there's common sense there. Now, when we say happiness, though, happiness comes thanks to the non-agitated mind. Okay, a peaceful mind, a peaceful body. When you have piti or joy arising in the mind, that is also going to be reverberated within the body. Piti manasakayam pasambati. So as the mind is experiencing joy and the body is tranquilizing itself, meaning relaxing, there's this permeating sense of comfort, less of tension. Now, can this mindset, can that state be carried over while the child is, let's say, playing music or trying to paint something? Or you don't have to be creativity can also be done by the body as it's experiencing something, meaning like going on a hike in the forest and you're stepping into a creek and the weather is hot and you're stepping into the creek and the pebbles underneath you, the rocks you're walking over, and the water is all the way up to your knees and it feels so refreshing. It's wonderful, and the birds are chirping, the trees all around you, the breeze. That is a very beautiful moment for the body, the mind. Now, if you stay there for the rest of your life, it's going to be quite of a dukkha experience now, isn't it? So the only way that you can truly appreciate what just happened is when you walk onto dry land, out of the creek. So it's a process. So using the example of painting earlier, there would be moments where I am looking how the brush is taking a bit of the pigment, the acrylic or oil, and it's brushing against the surface, the hard surface of the canvas. I'm feeling it in my body. The colors, sometimes they would come out differently than I'm anticipating. But then when it's done, while I'm seeing it, when it's done, afterwards, the creative process is taking over, still continuing, but am I attached or am I not? So no longer is it a matter of the child playing the music, but their attitude towards it. Meaning, again, is the mind agitated or not? Can the actor walk away from the role not feeling like they need to kill themselves? Or act out some of the things that they have been asked to do in the script? Are they really picking up only to give up? So I'm answering you with a series of other questions, but hopefully they are the probing kind and allow us to think further. What are your thoughts on that? How does that register?
That's very good answer. Like walking through a creek, you cannot stay there forever. It's just, no matter how beautiful. That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other thoughts? Yes.
Okay, I just have something to add. Well, I have been playing the piano almost all my life. Okay, previously, before I come to the path, I I'm just simply playing the piano. But recently I have come to see that, okay, it's not me playing the piano, but it's me observing myself playing the piano. Okay, so I guess that adds a different layer of objectivity, okay, which I would say that I enjoy the process even more because, okay, to put it simply, there's less craving to the playing, but more objectivity. I wonder if that makes sense.
That actually brilliant example of also the aggregates, observing the process, which takes it to another level of observing this. Just like you're playing the piano, let's say flawlessly, it's so much skill, it's like it's playing itself out. The piece of music is alive in that room at that time on this planet, irrespective of the time of the composer who might have died, let's say 150 years ago, but it is being played out. And the mind is there, observing this whole process. You're not undermining the thousands of hours of practice that went into it, the muscles that had to be trained, and even that day they had to be trained and warm enough to play. The level of awareness and the mind being on which key am I hitting? Can we bring that mindset when you are walking? When you just have the experience of a thought, a memory showing up because your eyes caught a certain color or an image, which happens so fast, a form or a smell. Smells are perfect examples. You get a smell and all of a sudden you're transported in time and space. Decades, thousands of miles away, less than a millisecond. Now, in the midst of that travel in time and space, was the mind tagging along, going along with the process of watching the memory playing out, the associations? As we do this, we start seeing that the glue is coming off on this bundle of sticks called the 5 aggregates. Because you're no longer buying the lie that you've been telling yourself for eons, lifetimes, for hours, for days, for a whole life. You're no longer buying because you're seeing the process as it is unfolding without being so much invested, without believing the lie that the 6 sense doors are constantly bringing us, which is like a projection screen, playing all these different things, and we're believing it, we're believing the story. Brilliant example, thank you for that. It's to observe as the music is being played, or to observe as the creative process is taking shape on the piece of paper, as this character comes alive on screen, or on the paper as you're developing your characters as a writer. I like the way the questions are coming, because this is a very interesting and to me very intriguing and an advanced, I would say, part of the human endeavor, the creative realm that human beings have developed. And it's interesting how we can negotiate and find a balance between, for example, our professional lives, if it's involving these creative endeavors, efforts, and the Dhamma. How is the mind contributing to this? Is it being sucked into it? And yes, ego also has some part in that. I agree. Yes.
I just want to add something because Russell himself has actually written a story called Bodhi Leaves that actually answer his own question. Because the Bodhi Leaves is about a Vietnamese monk who came to LA and want to do the picture, this painting for the temple of Bodhi Leaves. And it took 3 persons of 3 generations to complete that painting. And the person who finally completed that, and everyone was happy, he does that after meditation.
Oh.
So I thought it was really good story to illustrate that you have to be clear-cut in the mind. So when he finally painted the Bodhi leaves, it's not actually according to the real color, but the color, when he saw it's different color, it's multicolor, because during his meditation, you just see the different light. So depending on how the light shines, so it's a very beautiful Bodhi leaves, but it just dawned on me that, well, it's only completed after his meditation. So thank you again for that.
I remember reading somewhere where Einstein, I don't know if this is true or not, but he mentions how in the campus of Princeton University, he had, I believe it's Princeton, he had written the whole equation on 3 blackboards, huge, of E equals mc squared, the actual formulas. And then he's asked, like, how did it come to him? E equals mc squared. When he was not involved at all with doing any equations. He was relaxed, probably when he was playing a violin, I'm not sure. But these thoughts, and he even has some thoughts that he shares in his lifetime about allowing things to just be after you've done your work, and all of a sudden it unfolds like you described, how the color appears to this person. Because of that tension not being there. See, we don't give enough value to the role of tension. Value, I mean like importance, that it must be addressed. The tension in the body needs to be addressed. And the tension has everything to do with our longing for it to be a certain way other than what it is. The seeking of other things, which definitely we're talking about the 3 defilements. So when the creative process takes over, what that I understand that as is the artist has let go of all. They have mastered the skill, yes. They've let loose. They're not thinking, overthinking every single step. Am I supposed to do this? No. There's a trust. Thank you for these lovely examples. Yes.
It's just another example, actually, Venerable. I was staying at a monastery, and I had a really relaxing time. Like there's a lot of the tension that came out of the body, and I at sporadic times write poetry, and there was this one time where this poem popped into my head, but because I was laid there with my eyes closed, I was observing this poem writing itself in my mind. I had absolutely no input at all. But if I was less aware, I would have been claiming, oh, this is me, this is one of my best pieces of work. But I was just the observer of it. It was so interesting, yeah. I just thought I'd share that.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a lovely image. Poetry writing itself as you're observing. Wow. Beautiful. Beautiful. And I've seen this also being mentioned in different areas of, again, creative realms. I know in acting that's what will also happen. Not always, but when it happened, it was just blows you away. And even the viewers, the audience comes and they say, what was that? And you're completely, you know what happened, you're aware, but, and creatively, like when you're writing, I'm presuming it's, wow. These are very important areas, and of our lives, that it's not just, the Dhamma is not divorced from your life. It's not something separate from your life. Even your profession. So my encouragement then is, given the emphasis that we're placing here on the creative process and how to negotiate, how to weave the Dhamma and these principles discussed into that creative world, my encouragement is that we take that with us throughout the week, perhaps even today. And again, I'm a big proponent of journaling, to write down as they come the thoughts, and how and whether they resonate with you on some level, or whether you agree, disagree, just allowing your thoughts to speak themselves, to write themselves, as you put it. And can you observe without any judgment? Can we observe without judgment? Judgment in itself entails, to the way I understand it, definitely some level of tension, powerful tension. And when there's tension like that, there's obstruction. And the Buddha was the most creative person I know, I've come across. The way he teaches, the way his words unfold, it's just beautiful. The way he addresses a question when someone's attacking him, about to say something, and how he takes that and uncoils that and serves him another meal, if you will, that allows them to become awakened. Wow. If that's not creative, I don't know what is. So, are there any thoughts, questions? I don't want to, walk away without answering it, if there are. Otherwise, we can just close, and we let us share some merits. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the achievement of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share in these merits. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Thank you, Venerable.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, for taking time.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Try to see if you have time to work on the journaling, just maybe a paragraph or something. Let it take itself wherever it wants. With the mind watching, observing. All right. I'll leave you with that, and I'll upload this as soon as I can onto YouTube. Take care.